All right, it is 6:31, and I would like to call the November 16th Planning Commission meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Mr. Tuckfield.
Here.
Mr. Provenzano.
Here.
Mr. Shudo is absent and excused. Mr. Spadafora, absent and excused. Mr. Oliver.
Here.
And Mr. Bentley, I am present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Approval of previous meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or deletions, or? Go ahead, Mr. Bentley.
I wasn't at that meeting, but I noticed two items, which I think were typos. One being, I believe it was item 7A in the minutes. There was a recommendation by this board to approve or denial of that rezoning. And I believe it was a recommendation to approve. So that should be corrected. And then I believe also what was left out of the minutes, because I believe Mr. Nunzio and myself were absent, that Mr. Shudo had made the recommendation or the motion to drop us from the rolls for any votes. And that was not, it's normally recorded, was not recorded. So.
Okay. Do you have that, Mr. Box?
Yes, sir.
And we should probably do a motion for Mr. Shudo and Mr. Spadafora. Anyone like to do that?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Tuckfield, seconded by Mr. Oliver to excuse them from all votes. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Motion is approved. Approval of tonight's agenda. Before we get to that, Mr. Box, did you have some?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that we approved the minutes. I don't think that's
did we?
correct.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I got it. So a motion to approve the minutes as read with Mr. Bentley's corrections.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, motion by Mr. Tuckfield,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Bentley. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. Approval of the agenda for tonight. Mr. Box, did you have some changes before we move on?
Yes, item 6B, the special land use for Ascension, it has been determined that the special land use is not needed for that item, so that item should be removed.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any other comments or suggestions for tonight's agenda?
Just verify, Mr. Chairman, that I believe items 7A and 7B are expected to be tabled, and we're going to handle that at the item, not at the agenda point.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody like to make the motion to approve tonight's agenda with the changes?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Oliver,
Support.
supported by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, under new business, we have rezoning request, residential one-family R1, and local commercial C1 to general commercial C2. Permanent parcel 0836452-022, located on the northwest corner of Hall Road and Gratiot Avenue, Section 36, Michael Yatuma, petitioner. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Just for the record, it is currently zoned R1, C1, and C2, and they're seeking to get the entire parcel zoned C2. The property, as I mentioned, it has 3 zoning categories currently. It is at the corner of Hall and Gratiot Avenue. The applicant is requesting, as I said, to be rezoned to the category of C2 General Commercial. They do have the intent of development of a gas station, convenience store, and a retail building. So I did go back and look at some history on this property. You know, it's odd to see 2 zoning categories on a parcel, let alone 3. So from my own knowledge, and I'll explain it to you, kind of how we got here. This property used to be right-of-way for Michigan Department of Transportation. Gratiot Avenue had essentially an off-ramp from Gratiot onto Hall. That's kind of why you see that curved shape within the parcel. And within the areas that have different zoning is also due to that leftover right-of-way. So when that was removed, sometime in the 90s, I'm not sure exactly when it was removed. I know the aerial in 2000 shows it gone, and the aerial in 1990 shows it there. So somewhere in there it was removed. That's when the leftover pieces were combined and created what you see here today. So just going through some of the history of the parcel, back in the 50s, it was, as you can see here, it was that whole area, which includes the piece across Gratiot, was zoned commercial. In 1973, it was zoned C2 commercial. It has been master planned since that time. In the 80s, you see it was zoned commercial as well. And essentially, I just want to show you that it's been zoned commercial for a number of years, but has been master planned for commercial for a number of years, as well as the upcoming master plan that is near its conclusion right now shows it as commercial as well. Ultimately, when our departments looked at it and looked at the use that could go there, our recommendation is that it's really impractical for residential use. No one is going to build a house on the corner of Hall and Gratiot. So it's likely that it's going to be some form of commercial. Whether C2 is that category, I guess, is up for you folks to determine. But getting rid of the 3 zoning categories on one parcel is ideal. It's very difficult to handle a parcel with multiple zoning categories. So rezoning it would remove that. It would align it with the upcoming master plan. And it would really align it with the existing development patterns along both Gratiot and Hall Avenue.
Okay, petitioners. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Please state your name and address for the record first.
Vito Pamplona, Pamplona Construction Management, 850 West University Drive, Suite D, Rochester, Michigan, 48307.
Jason Fleece with the Umler Group. Umler Group, civil engineer.
Okay, do you have an address for that?
We are located at, in Wixom Road, or in Wixom, at 19287 West Road, Wixom,
Okay.
Michigan. Thank you.
I'm probably gonna, if you're gonna speak tonight, I'm probably gonna need you to speak up just a little bit louder. Okay, go ahead, sir. Do you have anything you'd like to add tonight?
Just that we're in agreement with Mr. Box. You know, we looked at similar zoning within Macomb Township, and we feel that our site is consistent. Our request is consistent with similar zoning for similar type of intersections. And then looking at, he spoke to the history of it. This is a combination of old MDOT right-of-ways combined to this parcel. So it's kind of a patchwork, and it our project and what we're proposing is consistent with other sites, similar type intersections.
Okay, anything else? No? Okay. Commissioners?
I got questions of petition.
Sure. Mr. Oliver?
You own the property? Or going to own the property?
Yes,
Okay, is it combined now? All parcels, all the odd zonings are combined?
no, they're separated. They're R1,
Right, but the property that we're
It's one parcel.
looking at is
It-
gonna be
it's-
one parcel.
Correct.
Eventually.
It's already one parcel.
Correct.
It is one parcel now,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Bentley?
Your thoughts regarding the recommendation or the request to make it C2 versus C1? What were your intentions then?
We're in agreement with the C2 rezoning.
That's not what I asked. I guess I asked, why did you recommend the C, or why are you going for a C2 as opposed to a C1?
On the corner there, the hard corner, we're going to be going in for site plan for a gas station, and then north of that is retail. So if you look at the way it's zoned currently, the C2 is on the hard corner, and that is where the gas station would be. And then commercial retail would fit C1 north of that. So we're only requesting to rezone the entire thing C2 so that it's all consistent under one zoning.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right. Well, then I guess we'll open it to the public. So I need a motion at 6:43 to open it to the public.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mr. Tuckfield. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Folks, remember that you come up, please state your name and address clearly, and then you have a 4-minute time limit to address your concerns. Come on up, sir.
John Parkinson, 24261 Darwin Street. If you can look at that picture behind you, gentlemen, you see the white driveway, the whitest driveway in the picture. That's my colonial that we stand to have a big issue with this site plan. So I just want to say hello on behalf of the residents living at Hall Farm Estate, subdivision number 1. We respectfully ask you to deny the request rezoning of parcel number 0836452-022 at this time for this project for these reasons. Noise and light pollution would be beyond excessive. This would become a hazardous material site. Fumes from gas pumps and cars will loft over any proposed wall, not to mention the smells from whatever they deem to put the drive-through window in for. Traffic will increase at this corner and potentially causing more accidents than we already have there. Most definitely it will cause more traffic through our subdivision. The parcel's current zoning, as you know, is R1, C1, and C2. There must have been a reason for the R1 zone portion to be as large as it is. Mr. Tuckfield, I'd like to quote you when you, for just one resident at the last meeting, asked for a variance of a measly 22 inches to his property. You addressed concerns for health, safety, and welfare. Would you agree? If this was proposed in your backyard, the project requesting a rezoning and variance would cause a safety and welfare concern? Again, a partial quote from Supervisor Viviano. But we also have a responsibility to protect the rights of homeowners to live safely and nuisance-free in their homes. May I remind you all that you are residents of Macomb Township and you are supposed to work for the residents of Macomb Township you serve in. The owner of the property asking for a rezoning lives in Shelby Township. Again, we the residents of Macomb Township bordering this property requesting rezoning humbly and respectfully ask you to deny this request at this time. You, Sir Chair, you asked these gentlemen, why, or one of you gentlemen asked these guys why C2, why not C1? My question's exactly, why not just C1? Why do we have to put a gas station there when we have a gas station across the street, which would be a competing C-store, and we have a gas station on the kitty corner of M59 and Gratiot already? Why do we need another one? And that call box, you can't tell me, wouldn't be a problem for my window. I have a second-story window. My master bedroom would overlook that property as well as my bathroom window. Again, I respectfully ask you guys to deny this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Anyone else?
My name is Don Kunkel. I live at 45380 Abington Circle. And my statement is, as a resident of the neighborhood to be impacted by a change of zoning, I am voicing my concerns of a possible rezoning to a C2 classification. This intersection of two major state roads that are already congested to the point that Abington Circle, Barlow, and Darwin are being used as a new bypass to get to M59. The posted speed is 25 miles an hour. The Sheriff's Department should probably put up some things because we don't see any 25-mile-an-hour speed limits going through. If there is any congestion at that corner, our street becomes a nightmare. When the expressway was closed down, I think over a week ago, it was insane. You could not get out of the subdivision. It was backed up all the way to 21 Mile Road. And this is not a safe place to be creating this type of situation. These are residential roads. They were never made to be a high-speed bypass because there's too much congestion at that corner. It has proved to be a nightmare. Even the police or ambulances can tell you they have a hard time getting through there. There's too much already. In addition, these streets are a school bus route. Any addition to the congestion that this would cause is going to affect the school bus route negatively and the safety and the timely transport of the neighborhood children. Please deny.
Thank you, Mr. Kunkel.
My name is Philip Zioli. I live at 24204 Darwin. I've got 6 pictures I'd like to present you guys, if I may. I took them of the area. Okay, on picture number 1, sorry, I didn't have one for everybody. I'm standing on Darwin, looking down at the end of the street, and you can see all the trees there. Well, they're gonna cut down probably 90% of those trees and put up a 6-foot wall and some 24-foot tall trees. On picture 2 is I'm standing on the corner of Hall Road and Gratiot. You can see the for sale sign on the left side. All that vegetation is gonna go away, so they can put up a gas station, a 6-foot wall, and 24-foot tall trees. On picture 3, they keep on talking about the Dairy Queen on Hall Road. Well, I went down to the Dairy Queen at Hall Road, and on picture 4, I stood on the driveway to take a picture of the houses behind the Dairy Queen. If you look real close at that picture, you might be able to see a house. On picture 5, the white line in the picture is a 100-foot tape measure. I tried to measure the distance between the driveway and the houses behind me, and I went from the end of the 100-foot tape another 50 feet, and I still wasn't close to it because of the trees, fallen trees, and everything else. And just for giggles, number 6 is 3 deer in my backyard. You're going to displace all the animals in that area. They're talking about putting up a dumpster. Is that going to cause more raccoons, possums, and maybe rats? They talk about the different, how they want to be like everything else in Macomb County. Where do you have a gas station up against residential area. You don't have it on the 7-Eleven, you don't have it on the other one, the one up on 20 North Avenue and Hall Road, they don't butt up against subdivisions. The one on 21 in Gratiot, they don't butt up against a subdivision. Why? I hope you decline this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Nicholas Viviano, 45100 Gratiot Avenue, Macomb Township 48042. BD Lee Incorporated, we own the 7-Eleven directly across the street. Initially, gentlemen, when we signed the agreement for the franchise operation and to purchase the property, the land use was, for our area was C2. We were under the impression that there would be a non-competing. The adjacent property was zoned originally not to allow for a competing C-store or C2 gas station business. We've done a small degree of research, and there are not two gas stations directly across the street from one another in the township. We are on the northeast corner. This would be on the northwest corner of Gratiot and Hall Road. The expectation of protection when they zoned the property originally was so that it would not compete with our store or our use. We also had a concern for the driveways on the plot plans being directly across from one another that may cause a safety concern or crossing concern. And I was concerned about the layout of the plot plan, which would indicate that the structure, their proposal would, you're trying to place another gas station right across the street and put three entities, a gas station, a center unit building, and a retail outlet in that footprint. You know, why would the township allow the design of a C-store or gas station on a piece of property that might be too small to accommodate such a large building? Thus, their request for rezoning. And then, does the structure or design layout of the building not conform to the property's required setbacks? The previous meeting was for variances that they requested. As I said, 20-some years ago, we met all of the required setbacks, and we built within the township's required zoning requirements. And in 24 years, gentlemen, we've had no problems with the township, and we've had no violations with the township whatsoever, and we've challenged nothing that the township's ever wanted. We've operated our business in good faith and complied with all of the standards and laws, and we've never filed a hardship with the township. So I would respectfully request that this rezoning be denied. Respectfully, 7-Eleven Incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Viviano. Anyone else?
Hello, gentlemen. My name's Walter Sutherland. I live on 45333 Abington Circle. If I'm reading that map correctly, and I used to do it for a living in Vietnam, and that C2 doesn't quite cover your gas station as the way it is. It kind of bleeds over to C1 and R1. But at any rate, I want to reiterate what the gentleman from Viviano said, that I also had concerns about 3 potential left-hand turns within 100 feet of Hall Road. Now, they're right directly across from each other. So if you're coming north on this and you're turning, you're going to turn to the west, which would be your left, and there's somebody coming the other way wanting to turn into to the west side or your left, who gets to make that left-hand turn first could be at the time of day around 7 o'clock could be a recipe for disaster. I was also thumbing through the zoning board, the statement for rezoning. And I looked to page 4, and it has there, it says zoning ordinance for parcel without a variance, and it checks yes. Now, I'm kind of at a loss. Maybe you can explain to me how that got to be a yes when there was 2 variances at that present time on the 20th of October, I believe. So any idea how that happened?
We answer all the questions at the end. so
Okay,
just
thank
so
you.
know.
It also, on the bottom, it says if that yes should be a no, then does the subject rezoning agree with the township master plan? And it says yes. And I don't know, I have a question around both of those. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name's David Harms. I live at 24240 Darwin. My backyard's going to be a gas station. I don't know if the board understands, but all our homes along that street, our master bedrooms back up to that corner. I mean, you're talking about maybe 100 feet. If you look at it, like Phil said, if you look at any of the other gas stations around that area, there is not a gas station that butts up to a subdivision. I'm concerned about the lights. I have to work midnights once in a while. I mean, the noise. I oppose it. And I think everybody in the subdivision pretty much opposes it. I'm surprised there's not more people here. And everybody else has pretty much said everything that I was going to say, so I just hope you consider us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harms. Anyone else? Anyone? All right, well, then I need a motion to close the public hearing at 6:59.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Oliver,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Provenzano. Mr. Box, do you have any comments on our citizens and our friends' comments?
Well, I think a lot of the questions and concerns they have are site plan issues, so those would be items that would be addressed when there's a site plan up for discussion, not necessarily rezoning. They do have, concerns with whether or not it's C1 versus C2. I think you posed that question, which is why they're here. That's what they're asking for. They understand that their gas station doesn't fit within the C2. That's why they're here. They're trying to expand the C2 portion to that entire area. I know the one gentleman made a comment about non-compete. I don't think it's something we would traditionally do, is zone a parcel intentionally to not have competition with another parcel. That's just not good business for a planning commission to use that as a consideration, I wouldn't think. As well as there are gas stations across the street from each other in the township, 23 and North Avenue. There are gas stations on both corners right across from each other, one of which does back up directly to other residences. So,
Okay. Commissioners, any final comments?
Mr. Chairman, I did just want to follow up on one comment. One of the residents noted that it indicated a portion on the rezoning request for variances granted. Could you comment on that at all?
yeah, I was trying to understand what the question was. So they checked no, that there were no variances granted? Is that my understanding?
I know I've seen it on the rezoning request sheet. I should have pulled it up before I asked the question. There's a
I think I can clarify that.
it's on page 4 or 5 of the zoning application.
Mr. Tuckfield, the variances that were addressed are due to site plan, an eventual site plan. Again, this is a rezoning.
Correct.
So the question is whether the parcel, if rezoned, would need a variance, meaning size, right? Whether it meets the
Size
dimension.
or use.
Or use. Well, Exactly. I mean, we are zoning to C2. They're not designating the use as of this meeting. I know a lot of the comments were based on the use of a gas station, but that's not really in front of us. We're rezoning it today to C2, correct?
Correct.
So, they may come later, they're gonna come later to, present a site plan for their uses. But that's not before the planning commission did it today. It's only the zoning for C2. And the question before the planning commission is whether or not it's appropriate, and there's well aware of the factors to balance, so.
So just briefly to summarize, the variances noted on the sheet are not the type of variances that were heard at the ZBA.
No, those are for the site plan, eventual site
Correct.
plan. The question is whether or not they would need a variance to meet the C2 dimensions, actually, at this point, to be honest, because there's no designated use yet.
Yes. Okay, very good. And I think I understood. I just want to make sure everybody was clear on how that was. Obviously, it can be confusing with the same terminology used for different things.
Yeah, and just one point, the township would never enter into an agreement to promise one person that there would be no one around them to compete with them. I think that would violate public policy, to be honest, so, there were no promises made or nothing to my knowledge as to that, so.
There's nothing recorded.
No.
Okay.
No, what I interpreted the gentleman to mean, and maybe I'm wrong, is that they looked at everything around there and they didn't believe there would be someone moving across the street, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, so,
So if there's an agreement that he can produce, I'd like to see it, but I'm
yeah,
not
I
aware
was
of
gonna
any.
say the same thing. I
Yeah.
didn't, see anything like that, so
Yeah.
I was curious if they could do that.
I will tell you that the township, as it sits here today, would never do that, so I'm not aware of anything in the history.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then one other question for Mr. Box. Mr. Box, I had pulled up my master plan, and my master plan was a little more silent to the parcel than the copy you have. I might have an outdated copy or maybe even a bad one. I just wanted to verify. Our master plan map does in fact show those three portions of the same parcels, master plan commercial?
The 2008 master plan show it as residential. Every master plan leading up to that, all the way back to the
I see.
50s, showed it
Okay.
as commercial. And the one we're working on now showed as commercial. I obviously haven't been around the township since 2008 when that master plan was done. I did ask some individuals who have been around. They have no knowledge of why it would have changed from commercial to residential, other than possible just oversight.
Do you happen to know what the front yard setbacks would be for a residential to haul or grass it in that area? I mean, would you know if it's even buildable for residential?
I'd have to look. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm not sure that anyone would be willing to build a house on the corner of Hall and Gratiot.
Understood, and that's another thing, but obviously the parcel might not even be buildable for that, even if somebody did want to live at the corner of Hall and Gratiot.
Correct, yes.
There's homes to the north that are not too far from Gratiot.
I'm sorry, which,
Yes, but it's different with a front yard setback, and those were also built at a different time period.
Yep.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you're welcome, Mr. Tuckfield. Mr. Bentley?
A question, there were comments made that this would increase traffic on the subdivision roads. And, of course, we don't have a site plan to look at, but there are no roads that would be coming from this area. I'm not sure how this affects the traffic. Could you speak to that, because I'm not seeing the connection.
So, again, we're looking at rezoning of the property, not a site plan.
But we're talking
We
about-
have seen a site plan. There are no connections to neighborhood roads, nor would that really be possible to have connections because there's houses all the way around those neighborhood roads. Now, as far as traffic production from this, typical, if you look at standard trip generation manuals that the Federal Highway Department puts out, typically gas station type uses, the vast majority of the trips coming in and out of there are cars already on the roads. Not many people are leaving their house just to go to the gas station and go back home. They're trips produced elsewhere, passing by. They're considered pass-by trips, the vast majority of them. If there's congestion, would it back up into the neighborhood roads? I mean, that's, any driver can turn down any public road. So possibly, sure.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, to that point, when we heard about this at ZBA, that subdivision has a connecting street to Gratiot to the north of this parcel, and then it connects to Fairchild to the west of this parcel. So I think the indication is that when those two roads are busy, people use that subdivision as a cut-through from Gratiot to Hall, or I suppose potentially vice versa, although I doubt it. I think that's the concern that they're voicing.
I see, I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Are you good?
I'm good for now.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, do we have a motion? And this is just for rezoning.
Correct.
There's a lot of steps to go through.
Correct.
For,
So they did, if you'd like, I can kind of walk through some of those steps. They did come in initially for some variances. One was granted and one was tabled until the result of tonight's rezoning.
okay. Yes,
So
please, go ahead.
were this to be approved as a rezoning to C2, they would then go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals to try to get the variance that they requested for the call box location.
I'm sorry, I didn't get, so what location?
Call box, it's a gas station with
Yes.
a drive-through is what they're proposing. So again, if that were then approved, they would come back to Planning Commission with a site plan, which is where most of the comments brought up tonight would be addressed, looking at the site plan portion of that. Also, they're looking for C2 with a call box, so even if the call box variance is approved, it would be a special land use, so that's another thing that you guys would look at. The call box is a special land use within C2, so you would need to approve a special land use and the site plan before they moved forward with any type of engineering. And as far as traffic and congestion, it's during that site plan process that they would start working with the county and MDOT. Actually, these are both MDOT roads, so they would likely mostly be working with MDOT to determine, driveway locations and things like that.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Mr. Box, then the reason for going to C2 only is because they want to put in a gas station, and that wouldn't be allowed in C1, is that correct?
That's correct.
And-
Gas station would be allowed in C2, C3, or C4. If you look at our zoning ordinance, C4 was almost completely designed for Hall and Gratiot. They're not seeking C4, they're only seeking C2. If they were seeking C3, for example, they would not need a special land use for the call box. They would need a variance for it, but they would not need a special land use for it. So they're going with the lowest commercial zone that allows the gas station as well as the call box that they're intending, again, pending any special land use approval.
And then the buffer, right now we have a residential buffer. It is treed between Gratiot, obviously, and the activity there at the gas station on the east side, as well as there's really not a whole lot from Russ Milne, at least at the road. What is the buffer then for a C2 to residential that would be required if this were, not knowing what the site plan is, but knowing that there would have to be a buffer, a separation?
Right, so they would be required to build the 6-foot masonry wall, which I think was brought up by some of the residents. That's a requirement as well. I want to say 35 feet, Dave. I think Dave's looking it up here. I think 35 foot is the buffer required. Any landscaping, I know at the Zoning Board of Appeals last time they were showing and suggesting some trees roughly 24 feet, I think, in height as a part of that buffer. But I think some of the landscaping would be, at that time when they're in for site plan, would be in your purview as the Planning Commission to determine if that is sufficient landscaping to help buffer within that 35-foot setback.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bentley. Commissioners, anything else? Then do we have a motion on this item?
It's 40 feet.
No, sir. No, sir. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Oliver?
on parcel 08-36452 022, located at northwest corner of Hall Road and Gratiot, Section 36. I move that we zone the parcels taken from R1 and C1 to C2.
Okay, motion by Mr. Oliver. We have a second.
I'll support it.
Okay, supported by Mr. Tuckfield. Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Provozano,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Hardy.
Yes.
Didn't even listen to us. Didn't even care to listen to us.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving on, and maybe we'll take a 5-minute break, so if anybody would like to leave, you're welcome to do that. If you want to stay, please stay. We're going to come back to order here. The next item is C, rezoning, mass rezoning residential one-family suburban R1S to light industrial M1, residential one-family R1, and community facilities CF, located in parts of sections 17, 20, 28. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So I know you folks have sat through this. Now this is phase 6, so a number of times, but I'll explain it a little bit for those here in attendance so they can understand why we're doing this. So essentially what we're doing is removing the R1S category. So we're taking the existing zoning categories and we're getting rid of one of them. Why we're doing it, there's a conflict with the zoning ordinance itself and with the master plan, and that conflict will remain with the new master plan. And that has to do with the size of lots and how many units per acre you could actually get. And to remove the conflict, we have decided the best approach is to get rid of the R1S category altogether. So that is why we're getting rid of it. As I mentioned, you've been through 5 phases. This is a 6-phase process. You've been through the first 5. This is phase 6. Phases 1 through 4 were all R1S to R1. Phase 5 had some other zones, as well does phase 6 tonight. So the ones we're looking at tonight for phase 6 are in section 17, 20, and 28. You see highlighted there on the screen. The ones in section 17 we're proposing to be rezoned to M1 light industrial. The ones in section 20 to be rezoned to R1 residential one family, and the ones in section 28 to be CF or community facilities. So just going section by section here, the parcels shown here, they do have houses currently. Those folks who live there will be able to continue living there. It won't affect their taxes or anything. They can continue living as is. You know, if they have animals in their backyard, they can maintain that. It won't affect any of that. The primary reason we are going with M1, as you know, going through the master plan process, we are running out of industrial space. This is immediately adjacent to a lot of industrial property within the township. And so we thought it'd be best suited for M1 or light industrial. I will point out you see on the north side of this, the larger piece of the property, there is a street that stubs into it. So that is a private road with the condos to the north. If this is to be rezoned and someday developed as light industrial, we would not have that connected into this. We do not want, commercial vehicles or large trucks traveling through residential neighborhoods. So that would be a stub that never gets connected to the adjacent property. This suggested rezoning would not prevent any of the landowners from seeking a different rezoning in the future if they so desired, as we saw with one of the properties next door. In section 20, this one was a little bit tougher for us to determine what we felt the best use was here. It does have higher density residential to the south. It has the hospital behind it, as well as commercial activity to the north, and more single-family homes across Romeo Plank. At this time, we decided that R1 was most appropriate because there are houses on these parcels. They're currently used as residential properties, but again, if the landowners chose to come in for one of the other adjacent land uses and seek rezoning, we would not prohibit them from doing so. So they could still do that if they chose at a future date. So we felt R1 was the most appropriate there. Additionally, the piece, I guess I can show you with the mouse here, I believe. In the corner here is not large enough to meet some of the other categories, especially R2H or R2L, that potentially could have been rezoned to. So if these were rezoned to something else, that may end up being kind of a spot zone, which we were trying to avoid. And then section 28, these we're suggesting community facilities. These three parcels, two of which belong to the church on the corner, and the other one is a portion of the parcel, the portion north of the river that belongs to Waldenberg Park. Thus, we felt the community facilities was appropriate for those pieces. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the parcels within Phase 6.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Box. Commissioners, questions? Mr. Tusfield?
Mr. Box,
Bentley?
yes, thank you.
don't
Section
believe that, Adam.
17, could you show that again? And the property to the direct east of that, what is that zoned currently?
I can get the mouse back up. So this portion here is industrial, and everything over here is industrial. The one surrounded by the drain here and the other industrials was recently in for rezoning. It was R1S as well. It would have been part of this process, but they came in before we did, and they actually got that rezoned to commercial. I believe they've submitted a site plan for a Taco Bell at that location.
Okay.
I think he asked to the east, right? Parcels to the east.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say to the east?
I asked to the east, but
I'm sorry.
that's fine. I appreciate
So
the
the one to the east, I believe, is R2L, so higher density residential. And I know there have been plans in the past, I think some of which have even been approved at times. It was a residential development, and that development also, it did have a connection to the drive or the roadway here, but it was for emergency access only. There was no connection from this directly into this neighborhood. But again, that was a number of years ago, so that site plan doesn't exist anymore.
But that is currently R2?
I believe it's R2L.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Tuckfield?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Box, obviously it's got R2L to the north and R2L to the east. Industrial, we don't really consider a transitionary zone. I suppose maybe an R2L might be considered a transitionary zone, but not
Correct.
traditionally a transitionary zone against an industrial. Did you consider, particularly with the landowner to the southwest corner, asking for commercial, looking at commercial instead of industrial here?
We did consider that, and I think regardless of whether this would be to rezone to residential or industrial, there's going to be industrial abutting residential somewhere, because A, it already exists, and B, this may create some more commonality. As far as commercial goes, we didn't look at that as heavily. That didn't seem to be in demand at the time. If you do look at the draft of the master plan, which I think I did have on an earlier slide for one of the other items, it would be this area right here, which is orange, which is a flex use. That's what the future master plan is going to suggest for that area, with the intent of allowing higher density residential, commercial, or industrial, so long as that it's harmonious with its neighboring properties. Meaning there's appropriate buffers if it's, industrial next to an R2L or something of that nature.
But currently, as it stands, we don't have zoning in place for a flex use. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And then I guess that the next question would be, if we rezone this industrial, and before we get into flex use, someone wishes to develop it industrial, make an industrial park, they could with the current zoning requirements that we have, setbacks and whatnot.
Correct.
All right, well, so I have a couple concerns with this. I'm just gonna comment on them now. I'm not sure, I should comment them now, later. This parcel is master plan, I believe R2L.
Correct.
And unlike a lot of the other ones where we're moving it out of a non-conforming zoning district, so to speak, one that's not in our master plan, we're looking to change this, or the township is looking to change this to something that doesn't match the master plan. I think we have two other places where that's not the case, so CF, where you're matching the underlining zoning use essentially, and then the parcels along Romeo Plank that I believe is under a consent judgment, and as we talked about at our last meeting, you're basically trying to match the anticipated use. I guess I'm concerned about rezoning this prior to a master plan to something that's not in the current master plan, so we're trying to fix one inconsistency and we're creating another. And also with the established subdivision to the north, particularly with the possibilities of flex zoning, I mean, I've concerns about how the industrial is going to transition to the residential. And I think with the flex zoning as proposed, and as I understand it, that might be a perfect place for it, because maybe if properly buffered, it's a perfect place for industrial. I mean, if you put enough space in there, I mean, as you mentioned, there's industrial all around it, it's on 23, but I would certainly like, in my mind, more leeway, or, the ability to have a petitioner coming in and asking for a conditional rezoning or something to provide more buffering to the residential to the north. So I certainly understand the logic for industrial, it matches up with it, but I feel like this is one case where we have a lot better tools coming to make this a lot more harmonious, and I would sure hate to move it to industrial and have it go in a different direction simply because it was fitting in a gap of time where we don't have the tools in place. So I'm not sure what the appropriate move would be, but I guess for myself, I would not be in support of rezoning this one to M1 at this time, even if I am in support of perhaps that use being there long-term. So I don't know, Mr. Box, do you have any comments on that? I'm not trying to tear up what you guys did.
No, I certainly understand your concern, and
I'd like to do it the right way. But
I think the flex use in the future is the ideal use for the property. At the end of the day, R1S needs to go away, so it needs to be rezoned to something else. And I don't think R2L is viable here, because I believe two of the parcels are small enough that they would not meet the minimum width requirement for R2L. So that would really only leave R1 for those parcels.
R1S is an issue right now because if someone goes to build on R1S, we have nothing in the master plan or the zoning ordinance speaking to it. I guess I would ask, what are the odds of someone trying to develop using R1S on this parcel? I mean, could they even build? I mean, it's not like we're going to have somebody coming in and trying to put one house on this parcel.
Correct.
Particularly not in the next 8 months or however long we're anticipating to take to get into flex zoning. Do we have the ability, after we've gone through this, to leave it as is, seeing as it's the odds of it becoming a greater issue for the near future would seem to be extraordinarily low?
Yeah, it's your decision, right? I mean, it's ultimately your decision to agree or not agree with this rezoning. One thing we have to talk about here is this request is different than the past in the sense that there's different parcels with different zoning, so you may have to break these into different motions. So if you choose to deny the request as to this particular parcel, then they can always come back and ask for different zoning later once the master plan is in place.
Okay. And obviously, and I know you know this, but for anybody in the audience, we would not be voting to deny it, but rather to recommend denial, and the Board of Trustees would ultimately have the decision, and they could go either way. They could choose to ignore our recommendation if we went that route, or take it. Okay.
Correct.
And I know you knew this, I just want to make sure that
It's late.
I feel it too. So, All right, Mr. Chairman, that's all my concern, and again, I don't think I have a problem with the want we have for there. I just want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting the residents, and making sure we get something good out of it. So, that's all I have.
Okay, so, Mr. Tuckfield, you're talking about the industrial becoming flex? Is that what you're suggesting?
On the proposed master plan use, they have it looking to become flex, which we have not gone over in detail, but my understanding is that it would have the opportunity to be a mixed commercial residential or perhaps even industrial, but that it would give us more leeway, similar to, I believe, a special land use, to ask for additional protection against adjacent properties. So whereas now, if we rezoned it industrial, they could build an industrial sub similar to the west, basically straight up to that stub street. Maybe with a flex zoning, we might have more leeway to say, okay, stay 200 feet off the back lot line or something like that, where as we're changing sort of on the fly, obviously there was a stub street built here, we were planning on putting residential in. It gives us a little more flexibility to both, entertain what the market is looking for, but then also, maintain what the residents are looking for, which we obviously want to do if we can. Sometimes it's not viable, but sometimes it is.
So, Mr. Box, can we recommend that it be changed to, in lieu of the M1, to be changed to a flex zone, even though we don't have a
No, we don't have it in the ordinance yet.
definition yet?
Not until after the master plan process and that ordinance is developed.
And Mr. Box, or sorry, it is late. Mr. Bentley, my concern is if we rezone it M1, that in the intervening time, someone could come in with a site plan, and we would be duty-bound to accept it. If it met the ordinance, we wouldn't be able to wait for it, and it just seems a shame with the possibility of more flexibility. Potentially, I don't know what the planning department's plan is, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that in the first quarter of next year. Certainly before building is happening, to kind of throw that choice or chance away.
Yeah. I would also point out that I know you mentioned the stub streets and that, they were likely stubbed for a reason. Typically, yes, if a street is stubbed, it is for a reason that we intend that to continue forward. I will say that both of the stub streets here are private roadways. So unless these are developed with more private roadways,
They would have to be.
They would have to be in order to be connected. I don't think the county road department would connect public roadways to private roadways in that fashion.
So, Mr. Box, section 17 is R1, correct?
They're currently R1S, we're suggesting M1.
M1, okay,
Right here.
got it. And then 20 would be R1, requesting R1,
Yes.
Correct.
okay.
And 28 would be CF or community facilities.
So we could do these in 3 separate motions then, is that correct, Mr. Oloya?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right,
I got a question.
go
So,
ahead.
Mr. Brock, so if we just held on this parcel and left it R1S, when our master plan comes in, that would catch the flex zoning?
Right, and we could come back for rezoning at that time for those, yep.
When do you think we'll be able to adopt at our current speed?
Well, so it's more than just adopting. So it's out for review. There's a 63-day period. We were looking at early next year, January or February, taking it to Planning Commission and to the board for adoption, pending any major concerns or comments from neighboring communities or utility companies or you folks or the board members who will get a copy. But beyond adopting the master plan itself, an ordinance for flex use would then have to be written as well, which could take, several more months.
But if we
are working on that already, and with the anticipation of.
Right, we've talked about it. But if we left it R1S, it would probably unlikely that somebody would try to develop that under R1S.
I would assume
in a
so.
year and a half even.
Yeah.
It could possibly, because of the shortage of industrial property, somebody could come in here and maybe request an M1.
Correct.
And-
They could also do conditional rezoning.
And Mr. Chairman, I would mention that to Mr. Oliver. That's to me one of the big distinctions here is that we're making the request to M1. If it was a petitioner, maybe this would be a different question, but it's not a petitioner.
I'm
it's-
aware of
it's
that,
us.
yep.
So,
Okay. Anyone else? All right, should we do this in 3 separate motions?
I think
go to
that's
the
I
public.
think that's wise, given the
Oh, we
breakdown.
gotta go to the public first,
Yes.
though.
That's right.
All right.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oliver. Seconded, I'll second it. Anyone that would like to speak on section 17, 20, and 28, please come up to the podium and give us your name and address, and you have 4 minutes.
I'm going to read this, so I'm not being rude. Barbara Hayworth, Barbara and Chuck Hayworth, 17738 Cottonwood Drive, Mapleville subdivision.
Just a moment. Mr. Hayworth, can you pull her mic down? There you go.
Okay.
Okay, that's better.
I didn't know if I was supposed to touch it.
Yeah.
Okay, our house is located, the 4th house from Hickory, which is where the green line almost ends, going east. We're here to just view our opinion on the proposed rezoning from agriculture to industrial behind our home. That's section 17. This seems to be something that has kind of been in the planning commission for a while, but I mean, we didn't hear about it until on Facebook last night. You know, there are many empty industrial spaces available west of Romeo Plank on both sides of 23 Mile Road. And why aren't these being utilized instead of building more? What's going to happen to our property values? Because if this goes light industrial, they're going to plummet. You know, our bedroom and family room would face the industrial buildings. You know, it would be easier to accept if it was something like a subdivision or condo living behind us, but not this. Regency Centers, which is to the west of the proposed property, are industrial buildings. And by 6:45 in the morning, you can hear the noise coming from them. What's it gonna be when it's in our backyard? During the summer, around 11:30 at night, they start drag racing down that street. And, I mean, what's gonna happen again when it's almost in our backyard? How is the township gonna explain how you're gonna keep us and our property safe? The area behind us has butterflies that migrate there in the summer. Has there been a study on this, on any of the wetland back there? Or how about meeting with just the homeowners that are totally involved? How about the green zone that deals with easements from buildings and homes? We're not sure how that works, or how many feet they're gonna be from us. It seems like a lot of the planning by the township and board is not being done. When Wade Nursery was purchased, putting up that hideous black fencing, and now you're selling the property. Selling the property that was donated for a park, and I understand about the drain. I was in environmental engineering for a lot of years. But you have the Clinton River going through Walden Park. You know, I ask you to please consider or declining this proposal. There's enough doubt and issues not to rezone this property. Our questions and concerns need to be addressed. And I'm gonna end it by saying there's a lyric in Joni Mitchell's song that says they paved paradise and they put up a parking lot. Not much different in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello. Two of those parcels are mine. My name is Mary McKeon, 17775 23 Mile Road, Macomb 48042. We're not planning on selling it within the next 10 years. We plan to live there until we both retire. And just want to let you guys know. I've had nothing but problems with the neighbors behind me. I get called for weed violations. I get yelled at because they paid extra to back up to the woods, which we have taken down. And I have no problem having it zoned to M1. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Juliana Bronson, 50357 Pepper Tree Drive, and my question is on section 20. It says that you're going to change it from suburban to urban. What does that mean? Does that mean low-cost housing? That was my only question. But
Understood.
you can understand suburban to urban. What does that mean?
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
And I just have one more question. And I know it was that Ascension didn't need permission for tonight's meeting, but what was that about? And if you can't answer, that's fine. Just curious.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Anyone? All right. Well, then I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Oliver. Support. Supported by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Commissioners, any final comments?
Just one thing I wanted to check with Mr. Aloya. You mentioned 3 motions if we going forward with this. Are you thinking split by proposed or requested zoning to be gone to? Okay.
Yes,
I wasn't following that, but
I think that's the easiest, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
One question.
Sure.
Can I ask a question of one of the, clarification on one of the speakers?
I would say no,
Okay.
now that we've closed the public portion. Okay. Do we have a motion?
This is my time.
Pardon me?
This is my time. I can ask anything, can I?
As long as it's relevant.
It is.
Mr. Chairman, maybe Mr. Bach has a couple comments on some of
Yeah,
the speakers.
I just would like to answer.
Sure, Mr. Box, thank you.
With regards to the R1S to R1, suburban to urban, those are terms that were given to these land use categories decades ago. There is no low-income housing. Those are terms that have been around for a long time. Why they chose those words, I don't know, but it will not affect, that type of thing, low-income housing or any government housing, anything of that nature.
I mean, just to clarify, almost every subdivision within the township is zoned R1 urban. So if you look at 90% of the housing out there, it's already zoned that. That's what you're going to get.
Okay.
And many of these parcels are not wide enough to split up and make subdivisions. Maybe the one would be large enough, but most of these wouldn't be wide enough to split because then they would violate the 3-to-1 ratio that is within our ordinance. So even though it's changing from suburban to urban, I wouldn't anticipate anything in that area changing in terms of new subdivisions or additional densities.
Okay, all right. Motions.
Just one last
Okay,
clarification.
Mr. Oliver?
If the R1S to light industrial M1, nothing was done on it or was denied, it would stay R1S until further, and we could still go back and address it.
Correct.
Once we get our master plan done. Okay. Thanks.
And this is a recommendation to the board, so it would still, the 3 motions you make, suppose you vote in favor of two and opposed to that one, it would still go to the township board, and they may or may not accept your recommendation.
Okay.
Yes, or you could postpone a decision on that one until after the master plan.
That was gonna be a question.
Yeah, that's what I'd
Could-
like to do.
Is that something we could do, Ben?
Yes.
Because I got just a few questions on this too. Being that we're so close to the master plan, and being that I've seen some of this new flex ordinance, I think it really could help us out on parcels like this. So that parcel could be actually taken.
You would.
How would we do that?
Well, the issue is though, is that the motion before you is to rezone to M1. It sounds like to me that once the new ordinance is adopted, the consideration will really be to the flex zoning. So if at this time you recommend the denial of to M1, it doesn't prejudice you from voting on the flex later. So tabling it, I'm not sure really does very much good because it's really going to be a new motion later.
Mr.
Frankly.
Chairman, to Mr. Aloya, can we table it? Like, it's a recommendation. If it goes on
Yeah.
the board agenda,
Yeah. It's just a recommendation to deny it, essentially, is what you should do.
Yeah.
I mean, you could technically, but I think it's impractical at this time, given what the ultimate outcome looks like it's going to be, which is a whole new motion.
Yeah, and rezoning is not like a variance where someone comes in for a variance, you can only ask for it once, and then you gotta wait, what is it, calendar year, I believe, and then you can come back and ask for the same thing twice. Rezoning, the landowner could come back next month and ask for this rezoning. So you can, and if that gets turned down, they can come back and ask for it again, over and over again if they so chose to do so.
Okay. Mr. Bentley?
Mr. Box, in response to some of the one of the comments, regarding, wetland study and such, that's something, could you speak to that as
Yeah,
timing thing? I mean, we're talking here zoning, but timing-wise, that doesn't come into play until
there's construction plan, a site plan that would get looked at by the county if there's any drainage issues. It would, if there are wetland issues, it would likely get looked at by Eagle, the state of Michigan. So those are site plan issues that would be much further down the line.
Yeah. Even things like butterflies or
Correct.
Or snails or something, is environmental, and that's something that comes along later on.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any motions? Do we want to start some motions here? We got 3 of them.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to make a motion if there's no further discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd make a motion to recommend denial for rezoning from R1S to M1 for parcels 0817451-024, 025, and 018. This would be based upon our conversation and the ability to have greater flexibility for the landowner and surrounding properties with future zoning ordinance changes.
I'll support that. Mr. Bentley, call the roll, please.
Just a second. Okay. Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Prozano,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
and Mr. Bentley, yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, we have another motion. We have 2 more to go.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to recommend to the Board of Trustees approval of rezoning from R1S to R1 for permanent parcels 08202000008, 009, 010, 011, and 011, 012, and 013. Almost missed the last one there. This will be based upon the recommendations from our our planners to make it more consistent with our master plan and to support the existing zoning use on the property.
Do we have support?
Support.
Support by, motion by Mr. Tuckfield, supported by Mr. Oliver. Mr. Bentley, call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Provozano?
Yes. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Tuckfield, would you like to make
Sure.
a trifecta?
We'll round it out. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend rezoning from R1S to CF for permanent parcels 0828351, 013, 011, and 014. This would be because of the planning department's recommendations to make it more compliant with the master plan, and also because of conformity with the underlying use on the property.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Tuckfield, seconded by Mr. Bentley. Ms. Bentley, roll please.
Mr. Tuckfield?
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Provozano?
Yes.
And Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Motion passes. I think we're good. On to old business. Site plan, Phase 1A and 1B of the Maddox PUD. Get my glasses for this.
Might need a recording for this one.
Yeah. Permanent parcel 0836-353-033, 0836-353-023, 0836-353-030, and 0836-353-018, located on the north side of Hall Road, east of North Avenue, Section 36. Carl Zimmerman, petitioner. Mr. Box.
So as you saw in the email in the packet, they are requesting to be tabled once again. We're waiting on some, they had a purchase agreement that had expired. We need that to continue, an updated version to continue. They have not provided that. At this time, we're recommending that this be tabled or postponed indefinitely until they turn that in, and then we will re-advertise and come back with you at that time. So rather than table it to the next one again and again, I think we've seen it might be there for a while. So at this point, I think we're suggesting that this one be tabled indefinitely.
Okay. All right, well, I'd like to make the motion for site plan phases 1A and 1B of the Maddox PUD to be tabled indefinitely. Permanent parcel 0836-353-033, 0836-353-023, 0836-353-030, 0836-353-018, located on the north side of Hall Road, east of North Avenue.
I'll support.
Motion made by Michael Hardy, supported by Mr. Bentley. Go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you. I will. Mr. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Provozano?
Yes.
And Mr. Tuckfield?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Next item, under old business, planned unit development, general design, Fremont. Permanent parcel 08, I believe that's 3510004. 3510004, okay. Located on the southeast corner of 21 Mile Road and Card, Section 35. MM21 Card, LLC petitioner. Mr. Box?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So much like the last item, this one we are also recommending to be tabled. The issue here, this came before you once before, but the PUD agreement had a lot of work to be done. That was a number of months ago. They've come back recently. We've been working with them, but the issue that arose in this instance is that it appears that the original design had two driveways on 21 Mile for the commercial piece alone, and I believe that they've found that the road department is not going to allow that. They're only going to allow one, so it changed how they're going to piece out two of the units, and so they're revising some items on the PUD agreement. So we would like this to be tabled, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Aloya, so I don't know if he's heard from them at this point, if it's something we should table to the next meeting, or if it's more appropriate to table indefinitely.
I think the last email from him was that they'd like to get it on the next planning commission meeting.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion to table to the next minute the plan unit development for general design Fremont. Support? I'll support it. Mr. Bentley, call the roll.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Provenzano,
Yes. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick note on that, just to confirm, is that to the December the 7th meeting? I believe that'd be the first meeting of
Yes.
December? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
Well, that's okay. I'll write that down. All right. Next item on our list is public comments on non-agenda items. As a reminder, please state your name and address, and you have 4 minutes.
I don't believe I'll take 4 minutes. John Parkinson, you know my address, it's on file. You speak of what residents want earlier when talking about rezoning that M1 property, blah, blah, blah. Yet today, you guys failed us, more residents in Macomb Township. You totally ignored us at M59 and Gratiot. You all, including Mr. Box, disappoint me and disgust me. What can we do now as residents to appeal this? And I really want an answer from you, because we need to appeal your decision, because you could have easily said,
Sir, do you have
a
non-agenda item?
No, I have a right to speak.
No, wait a minute.
All right?
These are non-agenda
There's order.
items, sir.
There's order in the
I
meeting.
understand that, and
It's a non-agenda
the First
item.
Amendment gives me the right to say what I need to say. And I need to say this, and you're not going to deny me my right.
Certainly write the township or.
And you know what? I want to speak. Just give me my 4 minutes, please.
On a non-agenda
Please.
item?
You know what? I spoke earlier, and I wasn't heard. I want to be heard. You were heard. No, I wasn't heard, because you all voted for C2, and you could have voted for C1. You could have denied C2 and granted C1. You don't understand. I have the colonial on that property. Hold on. I have the colonial on that property. I have a 2-story. Both of my windows, my master bedroom window and my bathroom window, face that property that you are going to allow. Somebody sat here last meeting and said if this was a C2 property, he would be more apt to approve the variance, okay? The variance, now I'm going to talk about non-agenda items, because this isn't the agenda. We weren't talking about variances during this agenda. So the variance you guys propose, or they propose for this property, is a call box, okay? And they say that the decibel rating, blah, 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 isn't going to impede on our quality of life. That's inaccurate. They can't control the volume of the car stereos, the exhausts. They can't control that. No amount of trees are going to shield that. We hear Russ Milne's intercom when they call for their salespeople during the spring when our doors and windows are open. A 6-foot wall that they're proposing there is not going to be sufficient,
You're
nor
right
are
back to the
21-foot
agenda
trees.
item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anyone else like to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone else? Okay. All right. Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison. Oh, commissioner comments. I'm sorry. Do we have comments from commissioners? Anyone? No one? Okay. Probably best. Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison, Mr. Charles Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you some good news.
Sure.
Macomb Township tree lighting, Friday, December 3rd, from 6:30 to 8:30. There will be a special guest arriving, and we all know who that'll be. And there'll also be reindeers there. So mark it on your calendar. The other item is that the township is collecting toys for the Macomb Charitable Foundations at the rec center. And at all fire stations, there's drop-offs. So if anyone got anything to the residents of toys and stuff, they will be collecting them. And on business stuff, for the board, we did sell a parcel of that property from Pittsford. And we yielded $250,000 for a parcel that we couldn't use. So that's just something that we need to know. We updated our fireworks ordinance. It was in need of update, so that got kind of taken care of. And the other thing is that, as you know, we've had a grant writer we hired, and the grant writer has produced our first grant, and it was $3,000 for a handicap lift for our swimming pool at the rec center. So progress is being made.
Good.
And that's it. I know it's a lot.
A question for you, Mr. Oliver. The
What I
tree
tell you about
lighting.
questions?
The tree lighting, there's no
Yeah.
tickets or anything, it just
No.
come as you are.
Come as you
Okay.
are, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And like I say, it starts at 6:30, and usually there's quite a lot of people here. So it'll be good.
All right, sounds like fun.
Yeah.
ZBA liaison, Mr. Tuckfield?
Yes, Mr. Hardy, I have two things this evening. The first one is that the Board of Trustees, thank you, Mr. Oliver, appointed us some new members. So we had some shuffling. Ms. Posey, who's the clerk and is a member, she resigned as an active member of the board, and she was reappointed as an alternate. And then we were added two new members. I got to make sure I have the names correct and I pronounce them correct. Mr. Robert DeBrune, who is going to be a permanent, well, I should say a full-time member of the ZBA. He was appointed. And then also Miss Melissa Faustich, who I believe is going to be the second alternate member. So typically the way this works is that myself, Mr. Box, I'm not sure, we haven't worked out the logistics of this yet. We'll be in contact with the alternate members and the regular members before a meeting. And if anybody is expecting to miss, we'll then go to the alternate members to try to make sure we have a full board. This is good because with a 5-member board, you can get down to 3 pretty quickly, and it's generally just not great to do that for a number of reasons. We have to vote for majorities. It's hard to keep quorum. You have people with, a lot of important decisions that need to be decided, and when you're doing 3 instead of 5, it's not generally good. So appreciate Mr. Bach's work on that. We've kind of talked about it for a couple of years. Hasn't really been the time for it, but I think Mr. Bach and Mr. Viviano decided it was time. And a month later, we have a new member and 2 alternates, so I appreciate all of their work on that. And then just a brief note that tomorrow night, the ZBA will be here. We have a special meeting with regards to some variances for the proposed development at the corner of, I guess it'd be Future Garfield and 24. I think we've seen that on the rezoning phase here. I don't think we've seen a site plan yet.
It was a conditional rezoning.
Was it conditional on the site plan? I'm trying to remember. We're going to see the site plan for the first time tomorrow night, and they have a couple of items that we're going to be looking at, so.
That's 24 and where?
24 in Future Garfield, on the northwest corner.
Okay.
So I believe it's a memory, they're proposing a memory care unit, and I think we knew that at the time of the rezoning.
Yep,
So,
we did.
and I think that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. Mr. Box or Mr. Skirdo, planning department items?
I have nothing to add this evening.
I don't think master plans can be sent out for distribution. We're putting the final touches on it. Should be going out this week.
Hopefully tomorrow.
Hopefully
So
tomorrow.
you guys
We're
will be on
working
that
all day.
list, so
Big news.
you'll get a copy.
And we've already started looking at the zoning ordinance again, starting a rewrite of it. So we've already started entering. You talk about the flex zone tonight, we already got that. We're talking about the big, broad picture of it right now.
Okay. Motion to adjourn at 8:04.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Oliver.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you all for staying all the way to the end of the meeting.